Good evening, everybody. Rob O'Connor here for RobVinoSports.com. We have Rob Vino with us on a live feed here on NFL Round 1 Draft Evening. Rob, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, buddy. A lot of interesting things going on here tonight, so certainly enough for us to talk about.
I guess we'll start at the top. Quarterbacks going 1-2. No huge surprise. The Los Angeles Rams taking Guff out of Cal, and then the Eagles taking a Division One AA quarterback out of North Dakota State in Wentz. What are your thoughts on those two picks? Do you think they went in the right order? How do you see this all playing out?
Yeah, I guess from the respect of the teams, Rob, they probably went in the right order. Obviously, the Rams had an affection for Jared Goff, so he goes one. And then the Eagles, you and I are both from the area here, and we know that the Eagles scouted Wentz heavily and certainly was their choice. I think that they might have been left holding the bag if, boy, the Rams had crossed him up and taken Wentz. So I think they both got the guys they wanted. We'll see how soon Carson Wentz has to play. We know Jared Goff's going to have to probably play immediately, but hopefully for the Eagles, Carson Wentz doesn't. But the Sam Bradford situation is hanging over their heads. So there's a lot to be ironed out, a little more to be ironed out in the Philly situation, certainly.
My personal thoughts as a lifelong Eagles fan is that if the Eagles were going to mortgage the future, they probably did it 1 year too late. I think a Mariota Chip Kelly marriage may be better than a Doug Peterson Wentz marriage, but the Eagles had too much to climb last year to get up all the way to one, where this year they were a little closer to the top. Getting up to number 2 wasn't such a stretch, but I think it's going to be a very interesting scenario with Bradford. Will he stay or will he go? I think at this point, without him being traded on opening night of the draft, I don't see him getting moved this season. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't see how he could go to a team any later than draft weekend and be ready and comfortable with the playbook for the start of next year, especially if he's going to be a starter.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Tom Condon, the agent here, certainly putting the Eagles in a situation where they have very little leverage, and teams might be able to wait this thing out. Teams that might be, in line to make a bid for Sam Bradford. It's a crazy situation right now. And the best of all worlds for Eagles fan, especially, would be if Sam Bradford would just report, compete for the job, and let's see who wins it. He's probably going to win it. I think Howie Rosen has made that clear, the GM for the Eagles, that Bradford's going to be the starting quarterback as long as he comes and shows up. So we'll see where this thing carries. Sometimes these things can get real nasty between player, agent, and management. Bradford just doesn't strike me as a nasty kind of guy, though. This has to be all the doing of the agent here, I would think.
Yeah, I'm not really overly familiar with his agent, but I would think that Bradford is somebody who's really struggled with injuries throughout his career and who's really probably gotten paid a lot more money than he's earned throughout his NFL career in terms of productivity and health and success on the field. Should feel that this is an opportunity for him to play himself into a long-term contract somewhere else.
Yeah, I would agree. Unless they really feel that they can force their way out and Sam Bradford can find his way to Denver, a situation where you have a Super Bowl defense already in place, a situation that's really good. Unless you feel like you can do that, then there's really no other options in my mind, Rob. So we'll see where it goes from here. John Elway certainly isn't going to overpay. As for the two kids that were picked, once again, Jared Goff has the ability to hand off to Todd Gurley early on in his career. The offensive line will have to be strong for the Rams. Really hasn't been for quite some time, and perhaps Goff can make a bit of a difference. But my opinion there is, I almost feel like Case Keenum could do as much as Goff could in this first year. So a couple of teams, I think, taking quarterbacks, Rob, maybe not with this year in mind, but with the following year in mind, and we'll have to reevaluate it at that point.
Well, I think one of the big things that the media has talked about a little bit leading up to this draft and why the Rams and the Eagles really paid a price to get up to 1 and 2 is that when you look at the college ranks and the quarterbacks that'll be coming out in the next year or two, they really felt, at least the Eagles and the Rams felt, that these two quarterbacks were probably going to be the best opportunity for them to build a franchise around in the next couple of drafts.
Yeah, you wonder if that's the case. I mean, we watch a lot of college football, and when you have guys coming out like Deshaun Watson for Clemson, probably, when you have, to me, the difference between Jared Goff and Luke Falk up at Washington State is minimal. Luke Falk will be in the draft next year. I don't know that there's that big of a difference between those two guys from what I've seen the past couple of years. So I think there's guys coming out now. They're going to have their feelings, and I usually defer to the feelings of the management and the scouts. But knowing what I know about what I see in college football, I think that next year there might have been a decent enough group coming out, even better than this one. Let's face it. I think the point's well made that Carson Wentz and Jared Goff in last year's draft with Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, they don't see anything before the end of the first round. So I probably disagree with the teams in their assessment that this year was a better year to make a run for it. But you never know when you're going to get up there again, Rob, or have the opportunity to get up there again. Let's face it, the Eagles went from 13 to 8 to 2. You don't do that every year. So sometimes when you have the opportunity, you just have to go get it. And maybe that's what they did here.
Well, I guess the next logical question would be any shock at all at the pick of the San Francisco 49ers and Buckner going to Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly has a history for drafting Oregon players. Was that a homer pick or was that the right pick for the 49ers?
My guess would be that it's, in their eyes, the right pick and a little bit of a homer pick as well. I don't know that I could draft an Oregon defensive player inside the top 10. We saw Eric Armstead drafted. We've seen Dion Jordan drafted, both defensive ends, both tall, rangy defensive ends like Buckner from Oregon inside the top 10, and we haven't seen much out of either of those guys yet. The Don Pellum defense at Oregon didn't light the world on fire whatsoever, and Don Pellum has since been fired. So, perhaps the system a bit of that problem, but I don't know that I would trust anything. I don't know what separates Buckner from Armstead, from Jordan. Each one of those three guys, Rob, that I just rattled off, every single one of these draft analysts loved Dion Jordan when the time came. They all loved Eric Armstead when the time came, and they all love Buckner now when the time comes. So, you can never be certain, but a lot of times measurables overweigh actual ability. I don't know what's inside Buckner's motor and how hard he's going to play and whether that differs from the motor of Armstead or Jordan. But in my mind, I don't know. With the other players available at that point in the draft, I don't know that I would have gone Buckner, but certainly he meets all the requirements, right? And a lot of people think he'll be a 3-down defensive end. I think the jury's out. We'll see. But I don't know that it would have been my pick.
Ezekiel Elliott goes number 4 to the Dallas Cowboys. We're now down to the 24th pick, and not another running back has been taken. Is that more a product of no highly talented running backs available, or does that go to the devaluing of the running back position of NFL teams?
Yeah, I think we could speak pretty certainly on that subject, Rob, to where this year I just think the running back crop is down. extremely down. Derrick Henry, very productive college running back for Alabama. He'll probably be the second back to go. However, Derrick Henry, an awful lot of carries through his Alabama career and a different running style. Certainly a tall guy who does run straight up, and normally guys who run straight up in the NFL don't stick around that long. I know Henry's a strong kid with a pretty good burst, but Elliott's a different type of back. Elliott, in my estimation, at least warrants the number 4 pick. Everything that he does on the football field. You'll make a case, I guess. Guys would make a case that you can always look better with the talent around you at Ohio State and the talent around you at Alabama. But in the particular case of Elliott, boy, he's a heck of a runner. Not afraid to go up inside. If he gets past you, he's gone. You're not going to catch him from behind. We've seen him at Ohio State. Although Urban Meyer doesn't do it a lot, we've seen him catch the ball out of the backfield. And certainly his willingness to block and would endure you to any NFL franchise. So I think Ezekiel Elliott, pretty solid pick here at number 4. And I think the running back crop overall is just down. That's why we're not seeing anybody else in the first round.
You go to the other offensive specialist position other than quarterback, obviously, and you go to receiver. First one off the board, Corey Coleman at number 15. There's been a little bit of a run later in the first round with Fuller, Doxson, and Treadwell all going 21, 22, and 23. Any surprises there that a receiver didn't go earlier, or any surprise that there's a run later in the first round on some of these marquee athletes?
I think the guys that have gone are the guys that we figured would go toward the back end of this first round. I think maybe Will Fuller went a little higher than some guys had projected, but it really is a matter of what you need, Rob. If you need a speed guy, you're looking at Corey Coleman, you're looking at Will Fuller. If you need a 12 possession guy, now the Viking fans, we just saw on the live coverage, boy, the Viking fans go absolutely berserk for Laquan Treadwell. And when you can put him opposite Stephon Diggs, who had a great rookie season out of Maryland for the Vikings, it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, when you take into consideration the fact that Norv Turner's your offensive coordinator there, and he's had a guy like Michael Irvin in the past, physical, able to convert third downs. I think Treadwell's more than just a possession receiver. I know a lot's been made of his 40 time at the Combine, but we've seen Laquan Treadwell on the football field. Laquan Treadwell, I think, sneaky fast. I think he has the ability to get deep on occasion. So real good picks in all instances. One thing I will say is I heard an awful lot this week, and especially the last 3 days, commentary, written and television, both, about how Corey Coleman only runs 4 routes and he doesn't run the full route tree. Anybody who's watched Baylor for the last 5 years, since Art Briles has been coach, knows that none of the receivers run the full route tree. None of the quarterbacks throw anything but flies, bubble screens, and quick slants. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn to run those patterns or that you can't run the additional patterns. I think what's in Corey Coleman's favor, and he did go the highest out of all of these receivers. He went 15 to Cleveland. I think what's in his favor is his background a little bit here. Ray Crockett, the former cornerback for the Denver Broncos Super Bowl team, and I believe he played for Atlanta prior to that. But Ray Crockett is the godfather of Corey Coleman, and Coleman lived with him and went to Baylor because of him. And Ray Crockett has really shown him the direct line to the NFL. And I think when you have a cornerback, an ex-cornerback as your mentor, so to speak, and the guy guiding you, you can learn how to run pass patterns. So I think Corey Coleman, as opposed to maybe Terrence Williams out of Baylor, has an advantage. Hey, listen, Josh Gordon came from Baylor, right? And Josh Gordon was an all-pro receiver till his off-field setbacks cost him as a professional receiver. But Josh Gordon's a Baylor receiver who ran everything. So, I mean, it's always subject to the individual, and I don't know that general blanket statements, especially this one made about Corey Coleman only being able to run 4 routes and could be a bit of a project, I don't know that that's really true.
I guess the other big surprise of the first round would be Tunzel falling out of the top 5, out of the top 10, all the way down to 13. Obviously, he had the big Twitter incident just 13 minutes before the start of the draft. After he was finally drafted, he did not exactly deny that it was him in the picture. What do you think the picture and the civil suit with his stepfather, what did that all play into him falling out of the top 10?
Yeah, that's my immediate thought right there, Rob. When I saw the ticker come across last night in regards to the civil suit that's being filed by his stepfather, here's a guy who's had problems with Tunsil in the past. Obviously, we know Laramie Tunsil was suspended for a group of games last year due to an altercation with his stepfather. Then all of a sudden, you realize that Laramie Tunsil's going to be a top 5 draft pick in all likelihood, and out of the blue, here comes the civil suit, as if I'm going to get my piece of your NFL contract. And you can only imagine, Rob, and we're doing a lot of guesswork here, at least I am, but you can picture in your head how this might have gone down. And next thing you know, very strategically, 13 minutes before the draft starts, I'll show you, I'll wreck your night as a first rounder. Didn't happen. Miami didn't fall for it. Good for the Dolphins. I think this. Listen, Tunsil had those problems last year, and they had that physical altercation, Tunsil and the stepfather, mainly because Tunsil's stepfather's story to the police was that Laramie Tunsil was riding around with agents, which of course is an NCAA violation, and it ticked Laramie Tunsil off. So who knows? The truth lies somewhere in between all of this. But I do think that certainly it's a little too coincidental that 13 minutes before the draft starts, a video surfaces. To Laramie Tunsil's credit, like you said, he did own up to it right away, didn't deny it, and said all the right things in the interview with I watched the one with Deion Sanders on NFL Network. I did not see the one on ESPN, but he did say all the right thing. And I believe Miami got themselves a steal here. Now, what you worry about, I think, is should this issue linger between Tunsil and his stepfather, maybe you have some more minor off-field things with Tunsil. But let's see if it can all be blocked out now, and perhaps he can just get to playing football. Because if he does get to just playing football, they've got themselves one of the, if not the best tackle in the draft. I mean, a couple of guys wound up going ahead of him, Ronnie Stanley and Jack Conklin. But I think Tunsil, probably was the best of the three overall talent-wise.
I mean, I think the Dolphins got a great pick at that spot. I mean, to get that kind of top 5 talent down at 13 without having to trade up to get it is really a big value. And I could almost take it to the bank that if the Dolphins didn't take it, that's exactly the type of player the Oakland Raiders would have wanted at 14.
Oh, I could agree with that, especially, they could use offensive line help. So I think if you do the background work, and maybe because Miami had that little bit of extra time, Rob, sitting at 13 to maybe investigate it an extra, 25, 30 minutes. Maybe that's all you need. When you're up at the top of the draft and something like that just happens and you're scrambling to find out or gather valid information on what the reason for that video surfacing is, perhaps you just don't have enough time to get all your facts straight and you have to go a different direction. Some teams, it was reported, absolutely wiped Tunsil off the board, probably didn't have enough time to investigate, and it probably throws your war room into a bit of frenzy. But I think maybe Miami had enough time at 13 by the time 12 picks before them are made to get a good enough grip on this situation. And I don't think it's going to go – I don't think the story has legs to it, really. I think it'll probably be squashed. Not a fault of the kids. Hey, he did smoke weed, and certainly the NFL doesn't want to see that, whether it was 5 years ago or 2 years ago. They don't want to see that, but a lot of these kids have one-time offenses and turn out to be real good. So I think Laramie Tunsil gets a deserved chance. I could turn out to be wrong, but I'm with you. I think the Miami Dolphins got a heck of a deal at 13, not having to trade up to get Laramie Tunsil, lock him in at left tackle with that team. They're improved. They're definitely improved.
I mean, let's talk about the San Diego Chargers for a minute here. They went Bosa at number 3. They clearly knew who the first two guys off the board were going to be. It was no surprise to anybody. So they, in theory, had the number 1 pick of the draft in terms of all the other players after you take the 2 quarterbacks out of the equation. Do you think they made the right decision for their franchise going Bosa at number 3?
Well, they had 3 major needs, and all 3 were available to them. They had a major need on the offensive line. We know that that offensive line has been decimated by injuries now for 2 years, not just last year, but the year before. It just seems like every time they get a lineman gets hurt, and it's a domino effect for the San Diego Chargers, and they're crippled by midseason. They draft Melvin Gordon last year, but they're unable to run the football because they can't block. Philip Rivers is always under siege because they just can't protect. Philip Rivers, being as good as he is, makes the most out of having, not much for an offensive line. So they had that need, and you're talking about Tunsil. Maybe San Diego was scrambling to find out the facts on Tunsil. Ronnie Stanley out of Notre Dame. It had been reported starting late last night that maybe the Chargers were leaning in Ronnie Stanley's direction, having him rated higher than Tunsil. You have Conklin. So you've got 3 tackles there. They also had a huge need in the secondary, and Jalen Ramsey could have been a great choice there as well. And, of course, the other need was they needed a pass rusher on that defensive front. They just don't get to the quarterback, the San Diego Chargers don't. They chose the latter of those 3 I just described. They like Bosa. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Joey Bosa was a tremendous college football player. There's no doubt. Again, when you're on a defensive line that includes Adolphus Washington and company, that's a pretty good defensive line, and perhaps you don't get as many double teams as you would on another squad with less defensive line talent. But I still think Bosa very, very good at what he does. I think he can play all 3 downs. I think he's going to be good against the run. So, I can't fault San Diego for going the direction they did. They had needs in all 3 areas. They chose the defensive end area to focus it on.
Biggest surprise of the I know the first round's not over, but biggest surprise of the first round so far? Anything that really stands out to you as kind of your wow moment? I can't believe that happened.
For me, it was the Giants at 10. I really can't believe Eli Apple went at number 10. Certainly, to pick Eli Apple over Vernon Hargreaves, I think is questionable. If you like Eli Apple, I know it's hard to find trade partners, but if you really wanted a corner, you could have gone down, maybe get William Jackson III. I just don't know that Eli Apple was the right guy at that spot. Now, he's a younger player. Certainly his age comes into play, and maybe his youth has something to do with the fact that he doesn't show as well on tape as some of these other guys do. But I'll take Urban Meyer's word for it, Rob. And Urban Meyer flat out says that Von Bell was his best defensive back this year, not Eli Apple. I don't doubt that Eli Apple, because of his physical assets and because of his, height, length, speed, that type of thing, I don't doubt that he should have been a first-round pick. But number 10 to me, to the Giants, very, very surprising. I thought there were a lot of other directions, including Shaq Lawson, that maybe the New York Giants could have gone. They didn't. They chose Eli Apple. We'll see where that goes. But I say you take him ahead of Vernon Hargreaves. The only knock I can give you on Vernon Hargreaves was in watching the Florida Bowl game this year. He got absolutely shredded. And maybe people watched the Vernon Hargreaves bowl game tape of this past January and said, wow, this guy didn't come to play, and maybe we have a little bit of a problem with his motor and not caring, because it didn't look like in that New Year's Day game he cared an awful lot about anything. But you can't throw away an entire career and an outstanding career that Vernon Hargreaves had over just one game where perhaps he was preserving himself, knowing that he's going to the NFL. Maybe he didn't go all out, or maybe he just got burnt that day. Who knows? But I would say that's my biggest surprise. Eli Apple at 10 to me just didn't seem to fit, especially for the New York Giants. Just didn't fit.
I mean, we have to talk about the defending Super Bowl champion Denver Broncos, and obviously they have not picked yet in the first round, but they have done nothing tonight early to address their quarterback need, and it doesn't look like at this point there's anything out there through the draft that's going to be able to get them a starting quarterback immediately. I think that's the biggest concern for any team right now is the quarterback position of the Denver Broncos. What do you see happening there?
Well, if we talk this out for an extra few seconds here, it looks like the Broncos have traded up to 26 as we speak live here, and their selection is up. So we'll see who they wind up taking here. They did. They just selected Paxton Lynch, Rob. So you timed it out perfectly, didn't you? They just traded up to 26, took Paxton Lynch. I think, we see a lot of American Athletic Conference football because Temple, the local team here, is in that conference, and I've seen a lot of Paxton Lynch over the last couple of years, and there's no doubting his physical abilities. From my perspective, and I can't say this with any authority or having spoken to him or anything else, but I believe that John Elway looks at Paxton Lynch and says, hey, I have Brock Osweiler, the same exact guy. Because if you measure these two up, they really are the same exact guy. Brock Osweiler at Arizona State, 6'8", strong-arm quarterback who could run. Definitely at Arizona State ran a lot more than he did in the NFL, but has a lot of escapability for his size, can extend plays. Paxton Lynch can run. Anybody who watched Paxton Lynch's freshman year at Memphis, when he was under duress constantly as Justin Fuente tried to rebuild that program, you realize that Paxton Lynch was making a lot of plays with his legs. They got a little better his sophomore year. He didn't have to run as much. They got much better his junior year. This past year, didn't have to run as much. But when I look at those two guys, Rob, to tell you the God's honest truth, I don't see much difference between either one of those two players. So Elway figures, I'm sure that he can develop Lynch in the way that Brock Osweiler was developed. However, you don't have Peyton Manning there to learn from anymore. So Osweiler certainly had that advantage. But as far as physical ability, arm, accuracy, get out of the pocket, I think Paxton Lynch is almost the same player. He saved a lot of money there by letting Brock Osweiler go. And at 26, these rookie contracts are slotted. I don't know exactly what 26 gets paid, but a rookie contract is certainly a lot less than what they were going to have to pay for Brock Osweiler, and they might have ended up with the same exact player.
I know that there was a lot of chatter on some of the sites and the message boards and some articles out there about the Broncos liking Dak Prescott. Would the Broncos have been better off not moving up to 26 and giving up that third rounder? That is exactly what the Broncos did have to give up. They gave up the 31st and a third rounder to move up and get Lynch. Would they have been better off just holding steady, taking somebody at 31, and then maybe second round going after a guy like a Dak Prescott? Or is Lynch that much ahead of Prescott in terms of being ready to play?
If I had to gauge them, and if I gauge them on their college careers and then their physical attributes, I would take Lynch. Prescott's a shorter quarterback, 6'2", maybe. Probably have more difficulty seeing over the defensive lines in the NFL, where Paxton Lynch won't have that problem. I think that for all the good that Dak Prescott did for the Mississippi State program, and he did a lot of good during his time at Mississippi State. Certainly the combination of he and Coach Mullen was a very good combination the last couple of years for that Bulldog team. But I saw him, even in this past year, Rob, still continue to miss a lot of open receivers. I think accuracy is a question where Dak Prescott is concerned. I don't think it's as much of a question where Paxton Lynch is concerned. So for those reasons, the fact that Lynch probably, he can't, let's face it, Paxton Lynch probably won't run read option. Dak Prescott, you could throw that little package in to your offense, maybe 3, 4, 5 plays a game. If you have Dak Prescott, you don't really do that with Lynch. But everything else, I think that's required of a quarterback. I'd give the lean towards Paxton Lynch. Neither one was an under center quarterback. As far as knowing the defenses and who can learn quickest, I think they're both intelligent quarterbacks. They can both learn. So I think I would separate them the way I said earlier. Paxton Lynch just has the height advantage, which I think is huge. I think he's got an accuracy advantage, which is huge as well.
Is Lynch the Broncos opening day quarterback come September?
He probably isn't. And that's the hole that John Elway is in, because even with drafting Paxton Lynch, they haven't solved starting quarterback for this upcoming 2016 season. You're probably at this point in time looking at Mark Sanchez as the starting quarterback, and anybody who is, familiar with Eagles and Jets football realizes that Mark Sanchez is not a starting quarterback in this league for 16 full games. So they've still got things to do. Perhaps, behind the scenes, there's still a shot at Colin Kaepernick, or maybe down the road there will be a shot at Sam Bradford. We'll see what John Elway pulls out. But, Paxton Lynch isn't going to start right away. He's got some learning to do. And I think that very difficult to sell your Super Bowl defense on Mark Sanchez as your starting quarterback, unless Sanchez can come into these off-season workouts and then this summer when they begin the preseason and really win over his teammates with outstanding play. Then it's a different story. But I don't know that that's the guy you want to open up the season with. But we'll see. That's the boat Denver's in right now. They've got a starting quarterback. They've got a rookie backup quarterback, and we'll see where they go from there.
I don't remember, at least in recent memory, I don't remember a defending Super Bowl champion having such a big question mark at the quarterback position the following season in a long time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you, I was asked the question today by somebody, Rob, do you see the draft causing any future odds on teams to win the Super Bowl? Anything in the draft tonight that could happen that would, kind of make a little rattle and force odds makers to change odds on a team or teams? Normally, regular draft pick wouldn't do it. But I would say this. The one team that you could still see a shift on would be Denver. If they were to acquire Colin Kaepernick, I think you would then see a move on the future board because of that particular player. But other than that, I don't think any of these draft picks are going to be earth-shattering as far as the futures board is concerned. They're not going to force odds makers to go change numbers. But I still think that the unknown, the question marks surrounding Denver's starting quarterback position could definitely change things if they were to acquire it. Maybe I'll check that a little bit and say maybe if they get Bradford, there'd be slight movement. But I think the Kaepernick move would be one that would cause odds makers to lower Denver even more than where they currently are. And certainly they stand right now as a team that's in the upper echelon of teams figured to go back to the Super Bowl.
I guess we got to talk about something that's not draft related, but you're talking about Super Bowl odds, the impact of a 4-game Tom Brady suspension.
Yeah, well, and the first 4 games, they're important games, right? I think 2 of them are inside the division. So
Arizona's not going to be an easy game either.
Right. Non-conference with Arizona. Certainly Arizona would like to take advantage of that. against Jimmy Garoppolo. I think, is it the Dolphins and the Jets, or is it the Dolphins and Buffalo? I'm forgetting which two NFC or AFC East teams they play, but one is the Dolphins. The other, either the Jets or Buffalo. But boy, those two teams have to be happy to get one game out of their 2 game set with the Patriots without Tom Brady in the fold. I think that's huge. And the good news for New England is that after that 4 game stretch is over and Tom Brady comes back, the schedule isn't quite as demanding over the course of the next 12 games. So maybe they can make up ground. If you can survive.
It's the Dolphins and the Bills.
It's the Dolphins and the Bills. Okay, so Rex Ryan, appreciates that, having Jimmy Garoppolo rather than Tom Brady to face. If they can survive, even if they get out of there 1-3, as long as nobody's 4-0, you're still in pretty good shape, I think, with the remaining schedule, and then Tom Brady for 12 games. But it does make a little bit of a difference. And I didn't check them, Rob, after that announcement was made. I didn't check to see if New England's odds to win the AFC Championship, the division itself, or even the Super Bowl had changed much. But I will go in and take a look at that a little later just to see.
And I mean, 3 of those 4 Patriots games are at home. After the opener against Arizona on the road, they run 3 straight home games, the 2 division games we mentioned, and the Texans. I mean, I think that does make it a little easier.
Certainly, playing in Foxborough is always an edge for them. There's no doubt about it. I don't think that the Dolphins, I'll say this. I don't think the Bills are real intimidated by that venue. The Jets certainly are. Miami, if I'm right off the top of my head, has had their share of problems in Foxborough against that team. But, boy, they made drastic changes last year, right, to that team that didn't exactly pan out. They didn't become a playoff team, but they made personnel switches that, in theory, make them better, on paper make them better. And then this year, they've made more changes and more additions that make them even better. So we're going to see if the coaching change and maybe some stability down there in South Florida helps them to become a playoff team this year. But like you say, the edge for New England is that they get 3 of the 4 at home. But now that you mentioned the 4th team, the Texans, that's not even an easy game. So you've got 4 difficult teams with 4 good. And I would think that if you were to just group them, you would say that those 4 teams right there have 4 of the, upper level pass rushes in the NFL. They're certainly in the top quarter, all 4 of those teams. So it could be interesting for New England those first 4 games of the year. We'll see where point spreads come out in those games too. I know one sports book has actually released point spreads early for all 17 weeks every game. So, if you want to get the stuff early, maybe there's an opportunity.
Anything else you want to touch on before we call it a night on NFL Round 1 Draft Night, Rob?
Last one, you talked about the Oakland Raiders earlier, Rob, and they drafted a kid from West Virginia, safety Carl Joseph. In talking with my son a couple of nights ago, I thought that he would be a potential first rounder and wound up going a little bit higher than that. I mean, above the halfway point of the first round. So Carl Joseph, while a very good player, Oakland stepped out and certainly grabbed him earlier. They did that with their corner from Houston a couple of years back. And, of course, I think the other big thing to talk about here is there was a lot of chatter leading into tonight's draft, especially the last couple hours leading in, as to which side of Dallas's war room would win the tug of war at number 4. It was reported that Jerry Jones liked Ezekiel Elliott, that his son and the scouts really liked Jalen Ramsey. In fact, some have said that Jalen Ramsey was the number 1 guy on their board overall. And I guess we see who won out because Ezekiel Elliott was the pick. I happen to like the pick. So, the NFC East, here we go. Philly got a little bit better. Dallas gets, their running game back. And Washington, of course, a little bit better here tonight. Washington goes out and picks up Josh Dotson from TCU. very good wide receiver. I think the only team out of the NFC East where I could say, and I've already said that maybe didn't do, in my mind, the right thing here was the Eli Apple pick at number 10 by the Giants. But certainly they did enough in the offseason with free agency to maybe cover for that.
I mean, we don't have the first round's not complete. There's still, I think, 4 picks to come in. I know San Francisco's picking now, but you look at the breakdown: 3 quarterbacks, 1 running back, 4 wide receivers, uh, some offensive tackles, 4 offensive tackles, a center, and then a lot on the defensive side of the ball. In terms of the breakdown of the players selected, anything stand out at you there? Is that pretty much what you expected? Is the teams had a variety of needs to fill? They're kind of anything really stand out at you with that?
But I think that it pretty much went to form, right? As far as position groups are concerned, it certainly was a draft, or is a draft. We don't want to use past tense yet. We're not even through the first round, but it certainly is a draft that's top heavy in defensive line talent. So to see defensive linemen go, especially pass rushers go, Leonard Floyd moved way up the charts. We didn't really talk about him too much, but Leonard Floyd actually was the beneficiary of a trade by the Bears from 11 to 9 to get a pass rusher tonight, and kind of a tweener pass rusher at that, maybe a third down specialist at sacking the quarterback. So I'm comparing him to Aldon Smith. So I think as far as position groups go, the numbers really do add up to what we thought they were going to add up to. I think just maybe the positions that they went in, Rob, some a little higher than expected, some a little lower than expected. But in all, the names you expected to be called thus far in the first round of the draft are really the names that have been called. There hasn't been any real, oh my God moment where, that guy should have gone in the third round, not the first. So I think things have gone pretty much according to form.
I may be a half hour early in asking this question, as there are still a few picks to go in the first round. But in terms of tomorrow, round 2, what do you see happening? Who are the best guys that didn't get taken in round 1 that you think will go off the board early in round 2? What do you think? Is there any particular teams that might be looking to make a move tomorrow to fill a need that they weren't able to fill tonight?
Well, let's talk real quick here, Rob, because you bring up a real good question. But since we've been on here doing the broadcast, I've caught a couple, but to the best of my knowledge, Miles Jack has not been selected yet, right?
He has not been. I've got the results up to me. We are through pick 28 of the 49ers. They just took Garnett, the guard from Stanford. Jack is still on the board with the Cardinals, Panthers, and Seahawks to pick.
Yeah, so if he doesn't go, and like you say, we might be 30 minutes too early, but if he does not go, that will be your story heading into tomorrow. The report that came out on his knee shows that while it might not be career threatening, it certainly is chronic and will be of will cause him consistent trouble. Nothing that, from what I heard, that he won't be able to play through, but it'll always be there. And teams, when these medical red flags come up, they're very, very leery. Now, Miles Jack, a guy who just about everybody to a T thought, everybody, who focuses in on the draft thought would be a top 5, top 6 pick, top 10 at worst. Now we may be talking about him tomorrow, Friday night, as a second or third rounder. Somebody's going to take that gamble, and somebody's going to get themselves a heck of a football player, or at least a heck of a bargain at the position that they take him. I think that there's a defensive tackle that I especially like out of Louisiana Tech named Vernon Butler. I don't think he's gone yet. We will see if Vernon Butler goes. Also, you may see a couple of extra receivers tomorrow, and with the second and third rounds, there are guys out there like Sterling Shepard from Oklahoma that will be available tomorrow that I think will go. So we're going to still have a lot of big names tomorrow. It always seems like the first round creates this huge crest, excuse me, and then maybe it falls off. But we'll hear a lot of names tomorrow that people familiar with college football will be familiar with. And I think there's still a lot of good picks out there to be had. We'll see if there's any more wheeling and dealing between teams, but there's a lot of good players. This is a pretty deep draft.
I would agree with you there in terms of there's still a lot of teams with a lot of needs to fill, and I think that there are a lot of good players out there. And while there may not have been that top number one clear cut pick, I'm not convinced that Goff or Wentz, who went 1 and 2, will end up being anywhere near the best players to come out of this draft class. I think it's pretty deep. I think there's going to be a lot of talent available tomorrow and even into day 3 of guys that could make an impact on their team sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said right there is true. I don't think either of the quarterbacks will come out of this draft at the end of the 2016 season as the rookie lead story. There's plenty of position players here that are going to get a chance to step right in and play. Real quick, Rob, you do have the picks up to date in front of you. Have we seen Reggie Ragland from Alabama go yet?
He has not gone as of pick 28.
Yeah, so there's an excellent tackling machine at inside linebacker who has first-round talent that may sneak out of the first round and somebody's going to grab tomorrow. I think that happens to be a player you can plug in immediately, and he can be a difference maker. He can be a strong addition to your defense. So, like I said earlier, I think everything you just said is absolutely true. We're going to see players other than those two quarterbacks who dominated the headlines for the past 3 weeks, so to speak. We're going to see other players at the end of this year that do much more on the field, accomplish more on the field than those two guys do. But I think those two guys were drafted with the future in mind, where some of these other guys are, drafted with the present in mind.
Do you think if the Rams were not moving from St. Louis to Los Angeles, they would have done what they did to move up and get Goff? Do you think that as an ownership and as a franchise, they wanted to make an immediate splash to generate interest in terms of ticket sales and developing a fan base? Or do you think this really was the best move for the franchise?
There's another good question. I'm not sure that they would have, to tell you the truth, Rob. I'm not sure they would have moved up if they were still the St. Louis Rams. I'm really not. When you see the player that was selected at number 15, which is the spot that the Rams originally held, that player is Corey Coleman. The Rams lack explosiveness from their perimeter players. Let's face it, Todd Gurley hit the scene last year and made quite a splash, and Todd Gurley is going to be a very good running back in this league. He's proven it, but still the Rams' passing game suffers tremendously. And if they were the St. Louis Rams, perhaps they would have sat at 15 and drafted one of your best wide receivers and given Case Keenum somebody else to work with, right? So that's an interesting question. Probably the move forced the move upward in the draft, and I'm not so sure it's worth it. When you look back at Jeff Fisher's history as a head coach, when the Tennessee Titans were really good, they were all about defense. They did not have spectacular wide receivers. They relied on a running back who could carry the load, Eddie George, and they had a quarterback in Steve McNair who was extremely durable, played through a lot of pain, but he was a big guy who could extend plays. And if you take that formula, you probably would have thought Carson Wentz would be the choice of Jeff Fisher. But it was Jared Goff, California kid who played in Sonny Dykes' 5-wide system, 4 wides, and a running back, never under center. So it's an interesting selection, to say the least. I don't know that it would have been made if they were still the St. Louis Rams.
Robert Nkemdiche goes 29 to the Arizona Cardinals, which means we are down to 2 picks left in the first round now.
And they Arizona acquired a defensive end in free agency, notable defensive end. I want to say Mario Williams, but I might be wrong there. But they did acquire a real good defensive end in free agency during the offseason to go with Calais Campbell. And now maybe that's why they make the pick of Robert Kimdiche. Certainly, without the off-field incidents, Kimdiche, we would have seen him go top 10. This kid was the number one high school player coming out.
Mario Williams went to Miami.
Okay, did Arizona make a defensive end acquisition? Do you, I'll talk while you try and look it up, I guess. But I'm pretty sure Arizona did acquire a pass rusher to go with Campbell. If they didn't, and if I'm wrong here, then Kimdiche could fit the bill. It's good for a kid like this who, depending upon who you listen to, is either a bit of trouble or is just misunderstood. Either way, it's a good team for him to go to. You've got veteran leadership in that locker room. Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, even the head coach, Bruce Arians. I think it's a good, stable place for Kimdiche to go and show off his talents. So Arizona in a division where you've got good pass rushes, Seattle and St. Louis certainly now has one of the best. And I think last year against Carolina, when they got embarrassed in the NFC Championship game, they were kind of exploited in the front seven. Carolina, most came out of that game after watching it, believing that Carolina was just physically superior up front. And a pick like Kimdiche certainly helps here. So I think it's probably a good pick. If there was a good home for him to go to, this probably was it.
I mean, I'm just trying to look up the DN that I think you're probably thinking of. They got Corey Redding from the Colts.
Okay, so Corey Redding, well, then Kimdiche can start right away, Rob, as we try and hash this out while on the fly here. He's got the ability to start right away opposite Calais Campbell. So even a better pick with that in mind for the Arizona Cardinals, and certainly it makes them stronger across that defensive line. Kimdiche is a big guy. He can play all three downs. He's not going to have to come off the field against the run. He's not a situational pass rusher. He's the entire package. And like we said earlier, without the off-field struggles, this guy was going to go in the top 5, top 6. So good pick by Arizona. I certainly think that they hit the mark with that one. That's a good pick.
Well, Rob, that will do it for tonight. As always, the insights are appreciated. And be sure to check back to robvinosports.com throughout the offseason for the latest news, futures, projections, and more. Any final parting words, Rob?
Hey, we just look forward to tomorrow, right, Rob? I mean, football junkies that we are, we look forward to this. Certainly it will apply into the, odds that are set for the upcoming season. So, when you make this turn during the season where the NBA playoffs are fading and Major League Baseball is taking over, there's nothing better than 3 full days of football to watch. So we'll be keeping a good eye on this draft the next couple of days.
And we'll have all the breakdown and analysis for you right here at robvinosports.com. For Rob Vino, I'm Rob O'Connor. Good night, everybody.